Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with Ernie Harker. He is ernburn.com. Ernie has been doing branding and marketing for over 30 years. He's an entrepreneur. He's an author, illustrator. He's a travel TV host, Ironman athlete, and so much more. Ernie, glad to be talking to you.
Good to be talking to you too. When you go through that list, I get exhausted just hearing you say those things.
But we need to have like those multifacets, right? We need to have enough in our personality where there's enough to latch onto, so that way you can have these interesting conversations. If someone says, I don't care about the TV host, I'd rather talk about the illustrating or the branding, you have kind of that instant connection any which way you want to do it.
Absolutely. And that provides you with those different experiences in life, provide you with perspective so you can connect with people in different ways.
Yeah, and meet people where they're at. So where are you at? What is your current focus, your passion? What do you feel like talking about today?
Okay, after 2 years of being a dismal failure on YouTube, I studied illustration in college, and I became a professional illustrator. That's right out of college, doing concept design and storyboards and stuff in the advertising world, not the entertainment or gaming world, which is super, super cool. Mine was the advertising world. After doing that, kind of getting started with that, I've always done it throughout my whole career of branding and marketing and advertising. But when COVID hit and there was a lot of kind of like just lockdown, I saw my son being really engaged on like YouTube and social media. I'm not a social media consumer. I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. I try really hard because it's in marketing and advertising and branding, it is a required evil that you have to participate and subject yourself to social media. But about 2 years ago, I thought I'm going to develop a YouTube channel where I teach kids how to draw. But in order for me to get their attention, which is one of the first parts of doing advertising and branding, is unless you get somebody's attention, no one will stick around to hear anything you've got to say. So I thought I'm going to be this wacky, crazy Bob Ross meets Fast Times at Ridgemont High's Spicoli. Okay, Bob Ross, Spicoli, offspring as an artist, and I'm teaching kids how to draw. 105 videos later, over 2 years, I'm still struggling like crazy with getting an audience that's worth communicating with, that's worth spending the time and hours to produce these videos for. And so I just kind of learned my lessons from that. I tucked that away, and then I've rekindled my speaking business. That came naturally for me. I got referrals, and so I never had to really build the business speaking. It seems like I speak a few times, 4 or 5 times a year without doing any kind of promotion. I thought, I love this speaking stuff, so I'm gonna actually promote myself and focus myself on it. I just hope it's more successful than my YouTube channel.
And did you ever watch Draw Squad, or was that just a thing I watched as a kid?
Dude, totally. I mean, absolutely. And all kinds of things like that, especially like in elementary school, where you're hearing a story and you watch somebody create something out of magic and it turns into this beautiful visual to represent the story. Oh, that's how I kind of got hooked into art, was like the Draw Squad and things like that.
So that's your jam. And it seems like we can always like imagine the way that we want it to look, or that the way that could look. But then once you start putting the sketching to paper, then something ends up being created that's bigger than what you had in your head. And I imagine that it's similar with building up your YouTube channel or building up your branding. There seems to be a lot of maybe front loaded work, where at first you're doing all these things and you're not really sure how it'll pay off. You debug the system, building up the muscle, whatever you want to call it. And then eventually it kind of breaks through, doesn't it? Like with branding or anything else, it's like you put in the work, it's not working. And then at some point it starts working, but you don't even realize when it began to work. I mean, with illustrating, with any skill, I'm sure it's the same way, right?
Robert, I think you are so right. And I've never heard it described like that before. And let me put it this way. When I've studied a lot of art, okay? I went to school and stuff. And so when I draw from my mind, from my memory, people will look over my shoulder and go, oh my gosh, that is so cool. Now, do you just visualize what you want, project it on the paper, and then trace it? No, no. And the same thing with business. What you do is you have a general idea of what you want. And then you start kind of putting the big pieces together, the basic shapes together. And as you add detail, the picture becomes clear. And then you gain momentum with like, okay, I can see this picture resolving, this business resolving, and now I like where it's going. I erase here and I add here and I go, oh, I love the way this picture / business turns out. And so it's never what you think it's going to be at the start. It's just a general idea. And then when you realize what you've done after the illustration is done, you go, that's kind of what I had in mind, but it might be better, but it might be different. But it wasn't absolutely crystal clear to begin with.
And it hurts my brain almost thinking about it, because it's you end up in an unexpected place, but you did have a plan and you readjusted a few times along the way. And so it's kind of just this blend of, well, if it did not go according to plan, it's okay, you adjusted, but you also had some kind of a best guess going in the first place.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think a plan has to be executed perfectly, because even if you execute the plan perfectly, it may not result in what you would hope anyway. So as long as you have a really good direction and you put a lot of enthusiasm and use your best effort to get there, you'll probably get pretty dang close to where you would have gone if you would have been like super, rigid with your tactics. Maybe even faster, because sometimes when you're too rigid, you don't allow for mistakes or exploration.
Right. I agree completely. Like there are the surprise like benefits or surprise avenues. And how many times do you hear about this in business or marketing or branding, where there was some whole unexpected event that happened, and then because of this thing that at the time you thought was a disaster, you thought was an emergency, that was really the break that you needed all along. And so we're talking here about things like branding, and I'm sure you have some fun, interesting stories of catastrophe, of a failure, of kind of having to pivot part way along the way. So, I mean, what sort of stories come to mind? What do you feel like sharing with us?
One of my favorite stories is just because of who it is. The client it's Chuck Norris. Okay. His real name's Carlos, by the way. Okay. But Chuck Norris, he's probably one of the most famous global action heroes, screen stars ever. And not just in the US, but I mean, all over the world. He's got a really, really good following. But, and today, a lot of like the younger people know him as with these great memes, like when Chuck Norris cuts onions cry. So
yeah, or like when he does a push up, he pushes the world down, right, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, he was drilling for water to irrigate his fields in southern Texas. He lives in Navasota, Texas, and like there's no neighbors around. It's just a big field. I've been there several times. But he's just got he's got a ranch. Lone Wolf McQuaid, the Lone Wolf Ranch is what it's called, the Lone Wolf Ranch. Anyway, so he's drilling for water to irrigate. And the water that comes up, he finally gets some water. It is super, super clear, clearer than they had expected. And it's like, wow, this is way clear. Because usually it's like muddy or silty or something like that. So they get it tested at a hydrologist, and they say, there's something wrong with your water. You sent us pure water. You need to send us a sample of the water from the well. There must have been a mix-up. They're like, okay, so they send them a few samples, and all the samples are the same, and they're all from the well. And the hydrologists are saying, this is remarkable. You've discovered not a well, but you've discovered water, an aquifer that is like 10,000 years old, and it's totally pure and clean and drinkable right out of the ground like this. And so Gina, Chuck's wife, goes, we should bottle this and sell it, and then use the profit to help benefit our charity. They call it Kickstart Kids. It's a karate-based youth program, kind of like the YMCA or something like that for kids that centers all around karate and the structure of karate. And so they did. They built a bottling plant and started marketing their water under a brand of purity because the water was really pure, really drinkable, right? And I got involved with this brand because at the time I was an executive director of marketing at a convenience store, a large convenience store chain in the West called Maverick. And so they're trying to find a retailer to sell their water to the audience, to people everywhere. And so we end up doing some kind of a cool deal with them. That's a different story altogether, but where we did a co-branded marketing campaign. Well, they came back and said, the sales are not very good with the water. And I said, are you open to a critique? And they're like, yeah, sure, we're open. I said, everybody in the water business talks about how great their water is. What you need to find is a unique point of differentiation that your customer, your target customer, really cares about. And this is where we get into marketing branding. I said, people think that bottled water is already pure enough to drink. It's already been filtered. So it's bottled. You've already convinced them of that. So for you to say, oh, we're the cleanest and the purest, it's like no one else is claiming that because it's not important. It's an assumed product characteristic, pure water. Yeah. I said, what you have that nobody else has is Chuck Norris. You need to have, this is the Chuck Norris water. In fact, when I first heard about Chuck Norris water, I imagined that Chuck Norris would be lying in a trough, whereupon this water would wash over his body, put it into bottles, and I could drink the essence of Chuck Norris, and it would imbue me with Chuck Norrisness. That would be awesome. I would buy that water. I'd spend a lot of money to buy that water to make me like Chuck Norris. Well, with a little bit of friction at first, we got the Chuck Norris image, his picture on the bottle, on the point of purchase displays and things like that. And it started to develop a personality to the water that people wanted to now try. Oh, I want to try Chuck Norris water. The water's fantastic. The water is really good. It's crisp. It's got a high mineral content. The pH is just right. So the water itself is awesome, but nobody cares about water unless there's a story behind it. And so the Chuck Norris comes forward in the story that gives people a reason to try water. And so that was fun to see, kind of like this turn of events, this shift of brand from product characteristic to brand characteristic. It wasn't about purity. It was about this difference in the business.
And I mean, I think that shines a light on the need to do this kind of deep thinking, because I mean, you and I come across the lame kind of marketing every day, right? Where they list out these things that it's like, well, I get that you have a fast customer support response time, but I don't really care that much. And I already assumed that you and everyone else had that. So that's interesting to think about. And it seems like this is why we need to be kind of just like thinking for days, weeks, months on end to find the magic factor, right? Because if you get too deep in the features, the product, what you're talking about with those early attempts, you're such a copycat. It's just talking about the same old things that not only is everyone else saying, so you're the same, but also as far as the buyer, they already assumed that was a given. So you're even like confusing them and messing them up, right? Like not only are you the same, but they already assumed that what you're spending all of these millions of dollars marketing was already the case.
Right. So you're basically spending money in advertising to reinforce the fact that you're no different than your competition, because you're saying the same things that your competitors are saying. And so in order to stand out, you've got to stop, businesses have to stop telling people first of all, what they already know about the business. And second, what you have that your competitors also have. All these features and benefits. The first part of what I teach and what in my book and when I do consulting is, what is your brand spark? What is unique about your company that is important in the industry? And it could be like, it could be anything. It could be invented. It can be established, Like we have Chuck Norris who found water on his ranch, right? Or it could be created like Top Golf. Top Golf is a kind of a bar, restaurant, activity center, but they basically said, we're going to be very different because we're going to center everything on golf, and everything's golf centric. So if you like golf and you like hanging out with your buddies and having a few drinks and stuff like that, well, Top Golf would be a very good option for you. So finding the brand spark, finding out what it is that's truly unique and different about your business that you can start talking about so you don't sound like everybody else.
Right. And that way, what you talk about is news, and it's not just repeating the same old stuff. And so what stops people from finding this brand spark? Because I imagine that there's a lot of not even knowing where to begin, the fear of upending their own business, the kind of wanting to stay in the same place they've always been, worrying about being too different and too weird. So like, what stops people from finding the spark, and how do we get there anyway?
It sounds like you've had enough experience in this. You've described a lot of the ones I experienced too. And that is, first of all, fear of being too different. And what's really weird about that is they're concerned about their peers or competitors thinking they're different. Okay. Which is like, why would you care? If you're in this to make money, why do you care what your competitors think? In fact, that fear of standing out is the very thing that's keeping you from standing out. Now, if you were to do something really bold and different that your buddies or your peer group or your competitors would say, oh, you guys are ridiculous. You guys are crazy. Well, guess what? Your business is going to get a lot of attention and they're going to be jealous. So I think fear. Another thing is like just not really understanding or knowing what that difference is. So I'll talk to people all the time and I'll say, hey, what makes you different? And then I'm sure you've had similar answers as you talk to people about marketing and branding. What makes you different? Oh, our customer service. Okay. Or we really care about our customers. Like, oh, that's so no other competitor cares about their customers. No, they do, but we care more. Auto dealerships, we're friendly. That's what makes us different. Like, truly, are you really friendly? Because when I went to your dealership, I was attacked like I was getting, like vultures were coming after me. That doesn't seem very friendly to me. It's like, well, we want to be friendly. Well, that's true. That's a good point to start, but it's hard for businesses and individuals to have the self-reflection, the self-awareness to truly understand what makes them different. Much like a surgeon would have a very, very difficult time operating on their own heart, or a dentist working on their own teeth. It's like, you got to have somebody, a consultant, a marketing firm, somebody that understands marketing and branding to test your ideas and to create some resistance with your ideas. But most of us, we want so badly to please the customer that we'll say, oh yeah, you're right. You're the friendliest. So let's go with friendly. And the problem is then that the marketing doesn't work very good. You're not getting attention. And so having somebody to help you walk through the process of learning what your unique USP, I think I've heard it called unique selling proposition, or unique selling point, or your brand spark is, until you find out what that is and repeat it over and over and over again in your marketing and advertising messages, you will just sound like everybody else. And so it's fear and it's unknowing, not knowing how to mine that and determine what that unique selling proposition or brand spark is.
And I like your term here of like the idea resistance. And you hear about, there are all these phrases like, if an idea is untested, or fleshing out an idea, things like that. And you and I have come across some massive egos, I'm sure, where someone had this big crazy idea and no one can mess with my idea, no one can ruin my dreams. And you say, well, that's kind of a dumb idea, or maybe we can kind of, like you said, figure out the resistance, or figure out where that might fail, or figure out ways to make it better. And so I think, it's painful, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
To like kind of listen to that customer feedback and tap into the market. But what I like and what you're saying is kind of reassuring is sometimes I work with some of these doctors, like you mentioned surgeons, and with these doctors, when they try to do their podcasting, they're just trying to show up other doctors, right? They don't even know who they're talking to. And I'm thinking, you're talking about this in that medical term, and shouldn't you be talking to like your audience, not your peers? Shouldn't you be talking to patients and people who need help? Don't just be kind of parroting what someone else is doing. Think about your audience. So as you're saying, who cares about what your competition is doing, or care about your competition to the extent where they'll be surprised and shocked about what crazy thing that you're doing that is nothing at all like what they're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've worked with doctors in the past too, and I know it's stereotypical to kind of lump them together, but they worked really, really hard to be as intelligent as they are in the medical field, and they immerse themselves in the language and personality of being an expert in the medical field, and so they use language that elevates them, that sets them apart from the everyday, from the pedestrian. Unfortunately, their customers are pedestrian. We don't know medical terms. And the doctor that can get really, really good at connecting on an everyday Joe Schmo level will be very successful in building a practice that's targeted to those people. Now, if you're a surgeon and you're trying to impress other doctors to refer your patients to me, then go use the lingo, use the jargon that sets you apart. But if you're trying to reach a pedestrian audience, you got to change the language. So that's kind of like the second thing that I try to teach is know what your brand spark is. And the second thing is identify your core customer, because until you identify your core customer, you don't know how to shape the language, visual and verbal language and tone that they understand and that is attractive to them. So it's like fishing. People have had all kinds of experiences fishing, and maybe they've only fished one time in their life. But if you're going to go fishing, you need to know exactly what kind of fish you're fishing for. So you know what bait to use and where to go to put that bait to get the fish you want. Otherwise, it doesn't do you any good to, get a worm, put on a hook, and go to, the ocean and hope you'll find a rainbow trout. Rainbow trouts don't swim in the ocean, and worms aren't naturally found, like earthworms are not naturally found in the ocean. So no fish is going to bite that. So know who your customer is so you can fashion the bait or fashion the message that will attract them and interest them.
And it all sounds very logical. And it seems like the default kind of unplanned way of going about this is, like you said, just go to the ocean, cast out your fishing line. Who knows if there are even fish at all where you're at. And but if you kind of have this logical, more step-by-step process of you say, what's your spark? And then who do I then go after, and what sort of bait do I use that attract or find those ideal clients, as they call them? And that seems like a way more kind of like pseudo-scientific way of going about this, where instead of just like saying, I have an idea, see if it works. That didn't work.
Right.
New idea, see if it works.
Right.
You kind of have more of a logical step-by-step strategy into making it work.
One of the things that I try to get people to do is, when you understand who your customer is and you're able to fashion the message to that customer, you now have so much focus. And what's challenging for sales departments, salespeople hate this. Salespeople hate eliminating anybody from the potential target, because I want to sell it to anybody who is willing to buy. As a salesperson, that should exactly be your perspective. But marketing is different. we have to spend money in advertising. We have to spend money to attract the people most likely to want our product or service. And that's not everybody. So sales, yes, sell to everybody who buys. Absolutely, sell to everybody. Marketing, target. Target specifically exactly who it is that's most likely to want your product or service and willing to appreciate what it does for them, so they'll part from their money to get it.
I like that a lot. And you always hear about, narrowing down the universe. And if you do a sales call with anyone and everyone, then you'll spend all day long talking to the wrong people. Or maybe if you're lucky, you'll be wasting like 95% and then only focusing only making results with the 5%. But if you narrowed it down first, you figured out who it is that's worth your while talking to. Yeah. And then when it was time for sales mode, then you focused on those sales skills and making that work. And that seems like a way more logical approach as opposed to all of one or all of the other.
Yeah, I think it's because you get more numbers when you're shooting with a shotgun, when you're targeting everybody with a shotgun message. The problem is it's not very effective. You get a lot of people, but you don't get qualified leads. And so the initial numbers of, oh, look at the return on this investment. Our initial leads are really, really high. Well, that's great. The problem is your closure rate is super, super low. And you've spent all this money and this effort on people that didn't even qualify in the first place. So if we can identify who qualifies and do our best to serve up marketing messages just to those people who are most likely to qualify, we'll get, even though we'll get fewer overall initial results, we're most likely to close on the leads that we do get. And that's where a lot of the money, that takes a lot of time and money too, is pursuing and trying to close the deal, especially like in software or anything like that, where there's relationships that need to be built. And sometimes that the sales cycle could be months or years long. So yeah, it's exchanging a quick, immediate return with numbers versus a longer, more effective close rate.
And you're pointing out the problem with social media, right? Where you have a lot of marketers, a lot of businesses, and they run up these huge numbers as far as the engagement, the likes, but most of that participation is not really there for money. It's there to just kind of amplify the attention getting, right? You see Gary V will make a video and get millions of views, millions of likes, but he's only targeting, Coca-Cola or someone who is seeing all the attention he worked up. But is the average person going to go to Gary V's social media? Is the CEO of Coca-Cola going to click the like button and say, now that I clicked that like button, I think I'm going to go and buy from Gary V now? It's like different purposes, right? One is attention getting, the other is actually making money.
Totally. I see that. We can get distracted by the size of the audience instead of the quality of the audience. Yeah.
And it seems like, and from you and me, when we're looking at, is someone worth my time as am I going to buy from someone, there's that need to have like somewhat of an established presence, I guess, like somewhat of at least being there. Like if Ernie Harker wasn't even on Facebook at all, or not even on LinkedIn, I'd think, who the heck is this guy? He doesn't even exist. So there's a need to be like kind of established. But I think what I'm getting from some of our conversation today is, don't get so caught up in what you see someone else do, competitor or not, but don't get so caught up in saying, he's got 500,000 followers. I need to just flush down all this ad money down the toilet until I get to that point. Yeah. Like kind of say, well, this is sort of a low priority. I'll get this kind of set up, but my focus will be more on what's actually growing my business.
Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing that up, because one of the things that I struggled with is I met with this guy who was an author. I won't tell his name because it might look bad on him. I respect him quite a bit, but I got an opportunity to interview him, and he's probably like 4 or 5 years ahead of me in my career. So he's written a few books. He speaks a heck of a lot more than I do. He's polished. He's great, But I noticed that on his LinkedIn page, he had, like 60, 70 something thousand, connections, right? And I'm going, man, that would take a lot of time and a lot of work to get. But I noticed that when he's posting, that he gets about the same amount of engagement and views that I do. And so I thought, is it worth it to spend the time and money getting mass quantities of an audience if they're not even going to be watching you or consuming your content on the regular basis? So I'd rather have 1,000 highly engaged fans that view my stuff on a regular basis than have 1 million fans with 100 people engaging with me. So it's not about the quantity of eyeballs, it's the quality of those eyeballs. Because I can post a message about like my widget and how cool and awesome it is to 1 million different people. But if I'm only likely to get 100 people to actually like be interested in that message, like that's a waste of time. That's a waste of money. I'd rather go to a smaller platform that has a much higher engaged audience. And I'm likely to probably spend a little less money on that, like an influencer or whatever. So when you spend money on influencers to get them to talk about your product, they've only got 1,000 people. They might undervalue their reach, but you're like, oh, this is exactly the kind of guy I want to do business with, where someone else will overinflate their value.
Yeah, and you hear all the time about click farms and bots and things like that, and like these social media platforms, they on purpose figure out that the algorithm to prevent the inflation of numbers. So you could send all this junk traffic at all these junk YouTube subscribers, but then they'll look at, well, do your subscribers actually watch all of your videos, or are they subscribe but not watching, or they subscribe and watch a video and click off? Like there's all these little hidden engagement measurements they do that we don't even see, where if you have a huge Facebook following, huge LinkedIn following, but what you post doesn't get views or clicks, they'll say, well, you have a huge following, but we're going to show even less of your content to your followers that already are not watching you. So it seems like a downhill slope versus what you're talking about of you make a lot of good use from a smaller audience. That seems like more of an uphill climb, because if they say, man, half of your audience watches your post every time you post something, we'll reward you by showing you more. So it seems like what you're talking about is the place to be, right? To be more of an up and comer who maybe has a smaller following, but the smaller following is more engaged.
Yeah, I learned that lesson on my YouTube channel that I mentioned earlier. I listen to Gary Vee. I listen to all these like influencers and stuff because that inspires me. I love their energy. I love their charisma. There's something like, oh, if I follow their recipe, I'm going to be successful, right? The problem is, I wonder how many people follow their recipe to the T and are still nowhere near as successful, right? Yes, they followed their plan and their process, but it doesn't mean it's a cookie cutter process that if you follow it, you will get the same results, because they don't factor in the tremendous amount of luck that comes into a very prepared process. Yes, you do your due diligence, and yes, you work hard, but you still need to get lucky. And sometimes that luck happens at just the right moment, so it takes off, or you get unlucky. And so, for example, I think I had 1,000 subscribers on 500 subscribers on my YouTube channel that I'd been doing for like 6 months. And I thought, oh, it's moving along. Well, I became friends with another YouTube channel with a bunch of kids. It's a family, and they have 6 million subscribers. So I've got 500, they've got 6 million. And we said, hey, Ernie, we're going to help you out. Let's do a collaboration. We'll do videos where we're on your channel and you're on our channel. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be great. Their whole channel is about skits and pranks and stuff like that. Perfect for that audience. Okay. Mine is about, let me show you how to draw a horse. Very different, very different. So all of a sudden, after we do this collaboration, my numbers climb really, really fast. And I get lots of views and lots of subscribers. And then my numbers plateau and they tank. The people that were watching my video, that were fans of this family video, it's called Kids Fun TV, by the way, it's awesome. The kids who liked Kids Fun TV don't like my content. And so YouTube goes, man, Ernie's channel, Sketchy, has a whole bunch of people that watch it, but they never come back. Therefore, he sucks. So we're not going to promote his stuff anymore. And so the lesson learned is make sure you know who your audience is so that you can collaborate, you can work with channels or partners in your industry that like what you like, that do what you do. Because otherwise, like in my example, my YouTube basically shut me down because there's no, they could see that the numbers were not in my favor. I wasn't getting the views. And so no matter what I do now, it's a dead end. Even though I got this, I thought the more eyeballs, the better. And it's my target audience because they're kids between the ages of 8 and 15. Perfect. Well, I needed to be a little more selective and find people who were 8 to 15 that liked to draw a lot. And then I would have been much better. I would have been much better with to collaborate with a channel that had a fraction, maybe 500,000 subscribers than their channel that was not in line with my audience with, 12 times that.
So it's so many ways to go wrong, right? And it seems like a lot of your stories here are centered around maybe examining the failure and saying, well, it didn't quite go this way, and kind of looking at the evidence and saying, well, here's why this happened the way it happened. And it's really refreshing because sometimes you come across, especially with entrepreneurs, where the focus is scattered and they have a plan and they try something and it doesn't quite work out and they just give up. And it's so frustrating. And you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about this concept of luck. And when I hear about luck, I'm thinking, well, how do I create my own luck? How do I maximize the number of lucky opportunities? Yeah. And for me, luck might mean just sticking to it until I get to where the luck is, right? So that like all the hard work that actually pays off, and I'm not just like working and I stop right there before the miracle. So we've been talking about so many different kind of entrepreneurial lessons and lots of things to think about, but I don't want to keep you for too long. So maybe in these final like 3 or 4 minutes here, do you have any sort of kind of like big lesson or big aha or something that kind of just like wrap all of these collections of stories up that we're talking about here?
I think the big wrap up I would say is that people like doing business with personalities. People like doing business with friends, not features and benefits. And so in a world where there are so many different brands that compete in the same channel or marketplace, it is essential, and it is our duty as business professionals to develop personalities around those businesses that our customers can resonate with, that they can find attractive, that there's a story that's engaging. We don't need more boring brands that that spout statistics. We need brands that engage and improve our lives just by their very presence, whether we buy from them or not. So I think defining a brand personality and then finding somebody who's really good at like graphic design and marketing and advertising and stuff like that knows how to translate that personality into the marketing language, logos, textures, fonts, stories, all that kind of stuff. That's just that's a language that translates your personality into the stories and visual images and stuff that the core customer will go, I love those guys. I love that business. And I'm not in the market to buy yet, but as soon as I am, that's the product I want because I love there's an emotional connection with the business.
Well, and I like that a lot. And I mean, even in our conversations here, we're talking about Chuck Norris, we're talking about Gary Vee, and you think about these big brands, they'll have the gecko frog, or they'll have the guy from like the car insurance that like makes the car accidents happen.
Mayhem.
Like Mayhem. They'll create the character, even though like they don't have to. But if not, then they're just a building, right? They're just a name. I mean, there's Tesla and there's Elon Musk, and you're wondering what's that crazy guy up to today, right? There's Apple and there's Tim Cook. So I think that's a really important lesson there, that even these huge companies, these huge brands, many times they'll create the character. That way there's actually a person that you're connecting with, and it's not just some name, it's not just some concept. Right. So that's kind of maybe an encouraging message for all of us to remember to maybe like be ourselves, let our personality show through. Don't be afraid to hide behind the computer, because what's the point of that? You're only doing yourself a disservice. And so many other scared marketers are probably doing that. So maybe it is the time now for you to stand up and stand out. And that way you can be someone that's that people know, like, and trust, as they say, instead of just this lame brand. And so if people here want to take things to the next level, they like the stories you've told, they like this branding, this marketing, all the sales advice you've given, how can they find out more about you? How do they know if they're the right fit for you? And what's the next step if they say, I want to buy something from this guy, I want to check out his presence? Where do they go? What do they do?
Instead of giving you a bunch of different links or connections, the easiest thing to do is to go to earnburn.com. And that's ERNBURN.com. And there you can message me, you can download a copy of my brand development guide. And any of your listeners, if they mention that they listen to you, I will send them a digital copy of my book. I've got the Kindle version, and I've also got the Audible version, where they can hear me read my book at 1,000,000 miles a minute with the enthusiasm and personality that I have.
Okay, so that is the place to go. ERNBURN.com, earnburn.com, and tell them that you found Ernie from the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank. That way he can hook you up with some free stuff, with a free goodie bag. That way, if this isn't just some podcast episode you listened to and said, okay, that's nice, I'll mark that as played, I'll move on to the next thing. This is your chance to get a freebie, and clearly branding and the story of your business and what you want to put out into the world, it's on your mind because you got this far in the episode. So you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to those future people that you're going to help. So go to earnburn.com and you'll be glad you did. And that way you can get something and you can change your life starting today, starting right now, and actually focus on the story and the branding and some of these intangibles that can get you to the next level and get you to where you want to go. So earnburn.com, and we will see you there. And any final parting words of advice here, Ernie?
As you're wrapping that up, I just want to say, preach, brother Plank, preach.
Yes, more power to something. So earnburn.com, we will see you there.
Thanks.